Good afternoon. I'm Bob Perry, Vice President of CCA. I welcome you here this afternoon to talk about a great area of opportunity, the Great Lakes region, primarily in the DRC. It's been an area of conflict, but there's an opportunity for the development. The UN has been involved in that, guiding the peace process, and they're reaching to the private sector to come involved in the investment opportunities to bring economic development as the basis for continued prosperity. I'd like to introduce our moderator, Mr. Modibo Touré, Assistant Secretary General and Special Advisor in the Office of the Special Envoy of the Secretary General for the Great Lakes. He will introduce the theme and the panelists. Mr. Touré.
Thank you very much. Should I go up there or sit here? Whichever. I have a mic already, so I guess there's thank you very much, Ambassador. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome. Welcome to this high-level panel. In a minute, I'm going to introduce, as I was asked to do so, the very distinguished member of this panel. But before I do so, let me just extend our sincere appreciation, really gratitude to the Corporate Council for Africa for organizing this. This is indeed a unique platform for us. It's part of a series of initiatives and events that have been set in motion since 2013 after the signing of a peace security cooperation framework in February 2013, whereby 13 head of states, now 13, originally it was 11, came together, decided that they really want to put an end to the recurring cycle of violence in the region and give a chance to the region to realize its full potential. So among the measures and commitment that they set out to do, they said, look, we're going to take care of the security issues. These are a prerequisite. We're going to ensure that the environment is conducive for the promotion of lives and livelihoods in the region. But we know that going forward, what is going to make or break this region is its ability to generate prosperity. So they put an emphasis in promoting regional economic cooperation. Among the commitment that they identified they themselves, they had also wanted the guarantors of a framework agreement to help put together a conference on private sector investment in the Great Lakes region. But they had wanted this to be really owned by the region. So what they had instructed us to do, the UN, the AU, the ICGLR, the SADC, that are the co-guarantors of this agreement, is to take a number of steps leading toward the investment conference. Now, this particular event, we had really wanted to seize the opportunity to raise the profile of the region, to raise awareness, really, about some of the good things that are happening in the region. And we are really honored today to have with us Honorable Maria Kiwanuka. Honorable Maria Kiwanuka is the Minister of Finance, Planning, and Economic Development of Uganda. She really doesn't need an introduction. One of the first-class Minister of Finance that we all know. I've had the privilege to work with her in some occasion in my former life when I was with the African Development Bank. She has been doing some fantastic things, along with her colleagues, Minister of Finance, that unfortunately, because of schedule issue, we couldn't have with us today. But they're very well represented by the ambassadors that we have here, the ambassador of DRC and the ambassador of Tanzania. Let me just say that if there is anything that you ever needed to know about the Great Lakes, you couldn't really find a better panel than this one. Liberata, from the other side there, was executive secretary of the ICGLR. So has really been at the forefront of all the agreements, the various protocols, the negotiations that brought together initially this country since 2006 when the first pact was signed. And of course, you all know the ambassador of DRC, very well known. DRC is really at the core of the region. In fact, if you were looking at the number of countries that are signatory to this pact, it's again DRC plus the 9 countries that that have direct border with DRC, plus, of course, South Africa and Kenya and Sudan. So that is, this animal that we call the Great Lakes, this is the configuration now. It's not only the core Great Lake that we used to know or the CPGL country, it's really the expanded Great Lakes. I'll come back later to give you some statistics about this, but I wanted this to be a very interactive session because, frankly, each and every one of these panelists could entertain you for the rest of the hour that we have here about the Great Lakes. But I'm operating under the assumption that 90% of the audience are potential investors in the Great Lakes. So I really want you to put very tough questions to them. You don't have this kind of combined wisdom and knowledge every day. So please, let us take an opportunity. If you are an investor, tomorrow you want to put your money in the Great Lakes, what are some of the things that you would expect the government to do for you? What is the kind of conversation you want to conduct with the Minister of Finance? What are some of the security issues? What are the risk profile that you want to mitigate? And this panel is here to help us sort of have a kind of conversation that I believe could lead to some concrete, practical, I would say, really sort of things that deal directly with the reality on the ground. So without further ado, I know that we're sort of running a little bit behind schedule. Let me just give it a chance to each of the panelists to say something about 5 minutes each maybe, and then we can really open it up. I want this to be a question and answer session. I think that's where we can actually get the best out of a congregation like this. So, Honorable Minister, you have the floor.
Okay. Thank you very much, and hello everybody. Sorry to have been late. It's been one of those days where I got so many double bookings. I'm very pleased to be here, especially to talk about infrastructure and investment opportunities in the Great Lakes, because that has been my life for the 3 years that I've been Minister of Finance in Uganda. I know you all are interested in infrastructure, in energy, agribusiness, tourism, ICT, mining, oil and gas. And as a private sector, we're very keen that you participate in those areas. And as governments, we're very keen to support you to get what everybody calls an enabling environment. I'll just touch on a few areas where in Uganda and East Africa, we're doing our best to enable that. As the government of Uganda, we're putting a lot of emphasis on infrastructure, on what we call border roads, on rehabilitating the railway and developing Lake Victoria in common with Kenya and Tanzania. What does this mean for you, for your investment opportunities in the Great Lakes? It means that we now have a very good road network from Mombasa along the northern corridor right up to the border with DRC, in eastern DRC. And I'd also like to tell you that eastern DRC is closer to Kampala than it is to Kinshasa. So we're all sort of very well integrated together. We have, and as the 5 countries of East Africa, and as my colleague from Tanzania will tell you, we are well along the way for a macroeconomic convergence. Not exactly the United States of East Africa, but we've given ourselves a 10-year roadmap to come up with a monetary union, something like what the EU has, whereby we'll be using a single currency, the 5 countries of East Africa, and with no trade barriers. But right now, what would an investor look for in the Greater Lakes region? First of all, a very wide integrated market of about close to 200 million people. When you take the 5 countries of East Africa, Eastern DRC, and Southern Sudan. We all have, we have no major geographical barriers. There are no big mountain ranges, no impenetrable jungles, no deep valleys. We all live together. We all have common cultural and trade links with each other. Another advantage is that Uganda and Eastern DRC are the breadbaskets of the region. We are net food exporters to the rest of the region. We have two growing climates, two growing seasons a year, and we have all the facilities to become agribusiness hubs. So agribusiness, distribution hub, development of the oil resources that have been discovered in Western Uganda and Eastern DRC. When you talk about tourism, we now have a single tourism visa for Uganda, Kenya, and Rwanda. One tourist visa will take you to all three countries. Uganda is the source of the Nile. The equator runs through us. We have mountain ranges with snow-covered peaks on the equator. We have tree-climbing lions, and of course the famous mountain gorillas, as well as 40 different tribes and cultures who all live in peace and harmony. But I think most of all, we have two common languages in the region, English and Swahili, which unite all the 9 countries that we've been talking about. So I'll stop there in the interest of time, but to say that, just to say we have a totally open economy in Uganda. You can bring in and take out as much foreign exchange as you like, though we hope you keep some of it in Uganda for reinvestment purposes. And you do not have to have a local partner. As long as you open up a company that is registered in Uganda, you're ready to go. You don't have to give a local person so many shares or appoint them as the boss of the company. But we do look to see that investors give employment opportunities and use local contractors for supplies.
Thank you so much, Minister. Moving along, Ambassador, please.
Thank you very much. I would like to add to the previous speakers and thank CCA for organizing this conference. Thank you for your leadership, and special thanks to Vivian, who has been very, very active in organizing trade missions in my region, in Central Africa particularly. I think the ministers talked about integration. The DRC is the largest country in this region. It's spanned from the west side of Africa to the east side of Africa, but it's also a country with little infrastructure. And this is why the government has been investing heavily, even with its own fundings in road infrastructure, and with the help of partners such as the European Union, the World Bank, the African Development Bank. We've been investing quite greatly in infrastructure. This government has built so far 150,000 kilometers of road, more than what the colonial powers built during the colonization and even during the 30 years of dictatorship. So we are moving forward. We have also, the DRC has also another great potential, which is the Congo River. And we are talking already with the World Bank to develop trade, but also agriculture around the Congo River and its tributaries. This actually will help connect, but also to trade food within the DRC, but also outside of the DRC. And we've been focusing on agriculture. We've chosen, we have already identified some, what we called zone de croissance, I don't know how you call it.
Growth area.
Zone of growth through agriculture, which is an integrating project that also helped to develop other industries around agriculture. The first project was launched in July, funded by the government, and for each project, the government is investing $100 million for each project. But also, having such a young generation, the DRC is giving grants to at least 2 young people per province to encourage young people to be interested in agriculture. And this is a grant where young people compete actually to develop agriculture. When we talk about developing agriculture, this includes also transformation and producing other industries around the areas. The minister, Madam Minister talked about the roads that link the DRC to neighboring countries. I think the most talked about right now is the road between Kisangani and Gulu, which will link Kisangani to Kampala. And we have other roads projects between DRC and Rwanda. We also have the next agricultural project, which will be which can be a regional project. We've been talking about it with partners, which will be the next agricultural project in the Ruzizi Plain. And the Ruzizi Plain is much closer to our borders with Rwanda and Burundi. So that will be our next project, and we project to start this one in 2016. Speaking about integrating project, as you know, if many African countries have not been able to compete equally on the global market, it's because of the deficiency in infrastructure, and one of which is power, electricity. In the eastern part, at the border between DRC and Rwanda, we have the Ruzizi River. We have already 2 dams, Ruzizi 1 and Ruzizi 2, that produce 29 kilowatt for Ruzizi 1 and about 44 kilowatt for Ruzizi 2. And that is still insufficient for the 3 countries. Now, in 2016, the work for Ruzizi 3 is going to start, and the production will start in 2020. And Ruzizi 3 will produce 147 megawatts, which will be distributed equally between the DRC, mainly the Kivu region, Rwanda, and Burundi. This will be also an engine of growth for the region. There are many, many other projects that we can talk about, but hopefully the question, we talked about the ICT already. Many other, maybe we'll be able to answer many other questions from the audience. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. Ambassador Liberata, please.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. Again, I want to thank CCA for giving us this opportunity. Let me confess, Modibo, that this is the first time I'm participating in a panel on the Great Lakes region focusing on infrastructure and development. I've always been addressing the conflicts, the violence against women, so this is quite refreshing, I must say. Yeah, so let me say, because I think the minister and my colleagues have said it all. I'm happy that in organizing this conference, you have seen the importance of the infrastructure as a cross-cutting sector. In whatever investments we speak about without infrastructure, it would be extremely difficult for any investor if he has to invest in other sectors, be agriculture, but without infrastructure, it's like you are building something to nowhere. So we are happy that during this time, when the ministers of finance are in town, you're now speaking on real issues. Because with infrastructure, we have 2 components of infrastructure. We have the hardware and the software infrastructure. The hardware is the most difficult. And the hardware includes all this, you're speaking about the roads, about the railways, about the ports, but more important, about energy. We, in Tanzania, because I don't want to preach anybody about Tanzania. You know Tanzania very well. But what gives us the comfort that Tanzania, because has been growing very fast economically, but also remains a center of economic and political stability, which gives comfort to our neighbors, I'm sure. So we whatever Tanzania plans, our country is also vast. It's not the size of DRC, but we have an area of 365,000 plus of square miles. So to cover Tanzania, that's still a challenge. But then when you cover Tanzania, like now, we have a well-developed road network that connects the regions of Tanzania. But in the process, we have opened up for the neighboring countries. I come from the northwest of Tanzania, on the lake shore of Lake Victoria. So I could say that I come from a regional hub, because when you are in Kagera region, then you see Uganda, you see Rwanda, you see Burundi, and you all depend on Tanzania as a gateway. Uganda always reminds us, he said, we shouldn't say they are landlocked, but they are land-linked. But then I say you are land-linked, but the gateway is Tanzania. So when we are talking to our investors, because when they look, especially the American investors, they look at the American market with so many millions of people, but then they say, with Tanzania, if I invest, you have only 48 million people. The market looks small. But then we say, if you look regional-wise, and as my sister said here and the minister said, you are targeting about 500 million people. And the good thing that Tanzania belongs to the very highly advanced economic communities, the East African community that provides the customs union, the common market. Now we are heading to the monetary union. But we also belong to the SADC countries community, this Southern Africa Development Community, where we link up with the DRC, we link up with the South Africa and those countries in the South. So I must say that when you are targeting our countries, the market is quite big. But also the challenges are also big, because we are now working on the rehabilitating or bring it to the standard, the central railway line that links Tanzania through Isaka, this is central Goma, and then it links up to Burundi and Rwanda. And we have completed with the assistance of the Africa Development Bank, we have, I think, completed the feasibility study. Modibo, I think maybe you know about this. This has been a long-term project, and we're now mobilizing investment through either PPP, so it has to have Tanzania linked. And you know, we have the roads, but then it's very expensive, and you can't transport much across the roads. But with the railways, you take tonnage and tonnage of cargo. So this is also the objective, is to open up the interstate trade. I remember President Obama, when he came to Tanzania, the issue he emphasized, he said, yes, it's nice to trade with the US, but you should first start trading amongst each other. But then you can't do it without the necessary infrastructure. But then also, most important when you talk of infrastructure is the power deficit. My sister here from DRC, I thought you would also say about the Inga. We are all looking into the Inga project, but in Tanzania, we are lucky that we are among the priority countries that the US administration picked to benefit from the Power Africa initiative. So this is where we see, of course, we can't depend on the grants, but this is where we are depending on getting the private sector involvement. And we were lucky, again, thanks to CCA, when during the summit of the US-Africa Leaders Summit, we had days dedicated to doing business in Tanzania. And we were able to show to the US private sector the opportunities that are in Tanzania as what they call the energy mix. So be gas, we have discovered trillions of cubic feet of gas, 50 cubic trillion feet. But we also have in hydro, in coal, in wind, geothermal. So in short, I'm saying the opportunities are there, but also look beyond one country, single country, to regional opportunities. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. I'm sure we'll be coming back to some of these issues, but just to pick up on a couple of key points that, that I heard from our panelists here. Looking at the viability of this market, you've heard some figures about population. You see, the 13 countries altogether, in terms of size, you're looking at 10 million square kilometer. Combined GDP, purchasing power parity base is about 1 trillion, which makes about, the average, and we know average does, hide a lot of disparities, but average GDP per capita of $2,800. That is purchasing power. Again, I'm making provision for all the disparities behind an average statistic, but it's $2,815. That is not something trivial. But if you look at the signatories of this framework agreement, the 13 countries, what you find there is you find the number 2 largest economy of Africa. South Africa is there. You have it among the top 5. You have Angola. Now, I know that the rebasing process is now going on. I think, Minister, you're planning one. Kenya has just completed its own. Tanzania is looking at one. If and when the rebasing exercise throughout the region, even 3 or 4 or 5 of them, rebase their economy, you will find a much larger pie. You'll find a much larger market to actually be able to make your estimation and projections of return on equity. In fact, there was a recent study by, I believe, Bloomberg, where we're trying to track the trend on private equity return on investment in the region. It's amazing. From 2009 to 2013, despite the up and downs in terms of security, flares up of conflict, rebellion here and there, is on the upward trend. So these are things that I'm sure you are aware. And if you look at today at the sovereign rating of many of the countries in the region, it looks pretty good. Looks pretty good. And today, you see governments, many of them, when they go out and ask the market, when they issue bonds, Euro bonds or anything, and Minister Kiwanuka is here to corroborate this, is that the market actually rewards this government. If they ask for 1 billion, most of the time we get 2 or 1.5 billion. So it means that there is a degree of confidence. Something exciting is happening behind all the things that we have the headlines sometimes that are not always very, very encouraging. So let me just stop at this point. Like I said, I really want this to be interactive. They have given you so many reasons why you should invest your dollar in the region. Why don't you tell them, why is it that you are hesitating investing a dollar in the region? Yes, gentleman in back there, please. If you can just take a minute, introduce yourself, and one question per person, please.
Hi, I'm Robert Knutson, president of Omni Housing in New York, Washington, D.C., Atlanta, and Mississippi, and Lagos. So being the old guy that I am, I know one thing. There's a saying in America, and it says happy wife, happy life. And I think Africa, for many times that I've been there, is also turning that way. So what are your countries doing to increase basic housing in your countries? What programs are you doing? I'm available to help you in any way I may, but we all know that the reason why America is so strong and why Africa will be so strong in the future is because they will have more domestic basic housing for the masses, not the rich people, but the masses. Can you address that?
Thank you so much. Why don't we take a first round of maybe 3 questions, and then we can field them here, and then we open up. Anybody else that want to either follow up on this or a different line of questions? Anybody? Okay, let's take a. Oh yeah, sorry. Okay, yes. Do you have mic nearby? Yeah.
Hello, my name is Judith Agwez. I'm an MBA student from Penn State. There seems to be a lot of talk about integration between the countries that are represented on stage. What kinds of challenges will that pose for companies who are trying to invest? I know that you talked about Swahili and English, but deeper than that, what are the tribal and ethnic issues that could arise?
Okay. Thank you so much. One last question on this. Yes, please.
Hi, my name is Diogo Pereira from Freshfields Brookhouse Derringer. Just from a legal perspective, one concern we often hear about it is not only political risk that you'd find in different countries, but also just contractual risk. How enforceable will the contracts be? I know a lot of this can be resolved through international arbitration and international conventions, but also I was wondering if the panel could discuss any programs relating to bilateral investment treaties and investment structures that could possibly mitigate political risk for investors.
Very good. Thank you so much. I don't want to sort of put this in a specific order of priority, but I'd like each of you to try very briefly to address perhaps the first question, I believe, is really sort of cuts across the various countries. Let us take a look at this, and I believe we can then move on to the issue of enforcing contract property rights and so on, and then finish up with the movement across border, whether there is any hindrance into that. Sorry to put you on the spot again, Minister, but would you like to take the first look at the question about housing?
Yes, question about basic housing. This, of course, is something that is of concern to our governments. We all know about the basic hierarchy of needs: food, clothing, and shelter. Our housing markets have suffered from two major issues. Not demand. The demand is very much there for low-cost housing. But the lack of financial market that is deep enough to offer the financial instruments both for construction financing and for mortgage financing. And then on the other hand, the late arrival of the new technologies, modular housing, hydroform, etc. Now that these new technologies are here, they've arrived in Uganda, we are now, in my ministry, is taking a lead in this. We're now actively seeking finance to attract financing for low-cost housing, building of and selling by enabling financing for construction and low-cost long-term financing for mortgage financing. Therefore, we're looking at opening up our pension sectors. We're looking at going into partnership with the pension institutions, pension funds in America and in Europe to attract their long-term financing into our countries to act as a mortgage financing vehicle. Because in Uganda, we have said it's the private sector that is the engine of growth and is totally responsible for at least 80% of the economy. So what we are concentrating on is doing those things that the private sector is not too good at, to build the roads, the power, as the ambassador has mentioned, to provide the technical training for the human resources, but above all, to keep the predictable macroeconomic indicator, climate. Predictable interest rates, predictable foreign exchange rates, free movement of capital, labor, and services in and out of the country, and basically lowering the cost of doing business. That is what the government is concentrating on. And in that, as far as infrastructure is concerned, we are concentrating regionally on two main roads. The one from Gulu to Kisangani, which will link Kisangani and all areas east of Kisangani to Uganda, and then through Uganda down to the Indian Ocean. And the other one is a transport project to develop Lake Victoria. Right now at night, Lake Victoria is just a black hole. We aim that by the end we finish this project, it will be a major waterway of low-cost transport, environmentally friendly transport, and which will then wake up the very fertile hinterland and the 30 million people who live around Lake Victoria. Both these projects are being in the final stages of design and are going to be financed by the World Bank with the governments of Uganda and Congo for Gulu Kisangani, and the governments of Uganda, Tanzania, Kenya, Rwanda, and Burundi as far as Lake Victoria is concerned. So in this way, we think this will then also increase the affordability of basic housing for people.
Thank you, Minister. Congo?
Yes, I think the minister touched the issue of affordability. We have a population that is still very poor, and building basic housing, developing basic housing without subsidies from the government is still very difficult at this point. Though we've put a lot of emphasis on housing, but these are housing that, you know, people who can afford to get a loan from the bank and to pay for this housing, but it's in a very short time because we still have, you know, we have yet to develop, you know, the mortgage as we see it here in the US. You buy a house and you can pay it over a period of 30 years or 20 years. But in the DRC, even when you manage to get a loan from a bank, you have to pay it off maybe in 3 to 5 years. That's not given to everyone. So this is an issue that is very, very important to us. But unfortunately, we are still, you know, developing our banking system. We're happy to say that we have more and more banks that are mushrooming right and left. Some of them are African-owned banks, and some of them are international banks. So hopefully, I would like to talk to you, sir, actually, to hear more about your experience in Nigeria, and maybe we can maybe find a way. You are most welcome to come and invest in the DRC. The challenges, someone asked about the challenges of integration, ethnic-based challenges of integration. I don't think you know, the challenges of integration has anything to do with ethnicity, because, you know, people have traded way even before the colonial time. It has nothing to do with ethnicity. I think there are much more important issues, such as, you know, treaties between countries, such as, you know, issues of governance, such as issues of how do you want to, you know, to shape, you know, this kind of trade or exchange. And this is why we're starting with this, you know, railroad. I spoke earlier about Ruzizi and some of the issues that we are ironing out with the three countries involved in making Ruzizi a reality. And really, we are getting toward the last phase to start developing Ruzizi. So the issue is not ethnicity. It can be political, it can be other things, but not ethnicity. Our people, even during the war, they continue to trade among themselves. The other issue
about the enforceability of contract. How do you enforce? Is there what does the legal sort of environment look like?
Yeah, I think that also is being developed in a very positive way, because more and more in the DRC, for instance, we have subscribed to some of the international you know, treaties in order to facilitate trade, in order to better to attract investments. We have put in place a trade tribunal to speed up the process whenever there is you know, there is an issue between either the government or the company. And we've been signing also bilateral agreement or bilateral issues between countries. We are very much advanced, for instance, with South Africa, because we want to encourage South-South trade, which all of us Africans have been trying to do for the last years. And I think what is encouraging is to see that all our countries here, the growth has been steady for the past, at least the past 5 years. the growth has been steady. And signing this trade, signing these agreements between our countries, it put us in some kind of discipline because you don't want to be the one who will mess up. So we're getting there. I see the prospect quite in a very positive way. The minister was talking about Lake Victoria. I can talk about Lake Tanganyika. We have a project of developing trade on Lake Tanganyika. And Lake Tanganyika will link the DRC, Tanzania, Burundi, and Zambia. So those are already several countries, from East Africa, Central Africa, and the SADC region.
Thank you so much. Tanzania?
Yes, thank you. I think most of the answers maybe are similar. But let me, starting on the issue of housing, as the minister said, because we now in Tanzania, there are more, I can't say mushrooming, but the pension fund schemes and the social security fund that touch on the ordinary people are now investing in housing. And the members of these pension funds, you can borrow from these pension funds to be able to have a house. Because in the past, we used to do it from our own savings, cash. And that one is not sustainable. I came back from the meeting of the diaspora, the convention, the annual convention in North Carolina of Tanzania diaspora. All these pension funds were there to market their product. Mm-hmm. So that is one way. But also, if we go by the theme of this CCA conference, building resilient cities, because the challenge we have, our mega cities have grown so bad that there's not even no space for housing. So now the government is trying to open up the country to very remote areas and be able to, that way we can be able to have a very planned and sustainable housing scheme that is affordable, but also that is planned. So this is what we are working on, and also we encourage and we are mobilizing investors in the real estate. It's one of the fastest growing sector, especially now with also the discovery of the gas. We have so many multinational companies, they need housing. So this is an area which is very lucrative now to invest in the real estate. Affordability, of course, is what I said, the government and the pension funds are trying to get to reach the ordinary person. Regarding the integration, the challenges, I thought you'd say, Charlie had a challenge. This ethnicity, again, as my sister from DRC explained, of course, that is what had painted our region so badly because of this definition of when you talk of the Great Lakes here, it's about the ethnicities, about this. This is no more a challenge. Of course, the challenge we have is to have sustainable good governance, ensure democratic rights, ensure that none of the citizens or population is marginalized from these bad policies. But then, as a region, and the minister said, and here we are, I communicate with my sister in Swahili. That is a very strong factor of unity, and that is what has united Tanzania. Tanzania is peaceful, among other things, because we don't see ourselves in terms of the tribes or ethnicity. It's, we communicate, we relate to each other very easily. But also if you see at the borders, I border, we come with, as I said, we border with Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi. People, sometimes they mistaken me of being a Burundian, because for the people around the borders, there's no problem, But then when you use this for political gains, is where you have a problem. On contractual risks, I must say, of course, maybe you are not convinced, but our countries now have very strong putting in place regulatory frameworks, respect the rule of law. The contracts are not the best, and it's because also has a number of issues, a number of capacity kind of contracts we enter in, but it's both sides. I mean, if it's due diligence, it's on both sides. We've been entering into bad contracts. But then, for example, Tanzania is a member of the Multilateral Investment Guarantee Agents, MIGA, and Africa Trade Insurance Agents. And then these two institutions provide, of course, the political risk insurance guarantee to the private sector investor. And likewise, we are also a member of the International Center for Settlement of Investment Disputes. This is a body affiliated to the World Bank. But also for the US investors, US companies, there is OPIC, the overseas private investment corporation. That gives, at least to mitigate the risks that you might face in your investment. So be assured that if you do clean business, you have all the frameworks in place. But if you want shortcuts, that's where we have a problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Okay, I just wanted to give the ambassador, the minister, a chance to touch upon the issue of integration and the contract enforceability, and then come back to you. Okay. And I'm glad that Tanzania has brought up the issue of guarantee mechanism that could mitigate the risk. I think it's good to have that on the back of your mind, Minister.
Yes, I'd just like to reinforce what Tanzania said about risk mitigation and being member of MIGA, the availability of OPIC, and there are also a lot of opportunities to buy down the risk. One of the areas where we're looking at for under integration is by integrating across East Africa, for instance. Contractual risks are lowered because all 5 countries agree to operate on a common platform. And the tribal issue, I mean, is totally non-existent in Uganda. I'm a product. As a child, I went to school in Tanzania, Bukoba, which was just across the lake. And I'd be put onto the ferry in the evening by my parents under school supervision, and wake up in the morning and I'm at school, and vice versa. So we have this common language, common culture, and like I said before, and I like to say again, there are no geographical barriers between us, Eastern DRC, South Sudan, and East Africa. If I may also say, we're also looking at housing finance for SMEs. Those are for people who are self-employed. Because in our countries, many of us are self-employed. So when you're looking for a housing mortgage, you can't, show a pay slip. But there are instruments that we've imported from India, for instance, which will help us to get that kind of housing on housing support going. But then on the areas where I'm sure you want to see about where you can invest, what are the profitable, attractive areas? Where is the government throwing its weight behind? First of all, is in support the oil and gas industry. We have companies that are drilling for oil and gas to extract first oil, but they need support. They need logistics, they need warehousing, they need supplies, they need financial backbone. There's a lot of opportunity there. And then for under the interests of risk, under the areas of risk, basically the one risk in our countries is land. And there we are encouraging, especially in the areas where it's communal land, we're encouraging investors to lease land, not to try to buy it, but to lease it. That way you don't tie your capital up. You're leasing the land the same way you're leasing an office or you're leasing a residential house. And we found this helps a lot in mitigating that kind of risk. We're also setting up industrial parks where investors can operate from and be sure in their tenure. Financial services, we have a lot of international banks. In Uganda, we have Citibank, which is an American bank. We got Standard Chartered, we got Standard Chartered and Stanbic. We have other smaller foreign banks, but we need a much bigger bouquet, if you like, of financial services. We have, in addition to the oil and gas, we got hard minerals. Uganda's just completed an aerial survey of all our hard minerals, and the report is out and is going to be posted on our country website for investors to have a look at. And the prognosis is that the value of our hard minerals is even more than the value of the oil and gas discovered to date. With iron ore, various rare earths, cobalt, uranium, and we are prioritizing which minerals should be up for processing first. We're building a refinery in the oil region. This caused a 2-year delay while we were negotiating with the oil companies who wanted to do 100% crude export. but now it's going to be more, ultimately be more like 50-50. We're putting in a refinery, and why do we put in a refinery when other refineries in Africa have not had a good track record? It's precisely because it's an inland refinery where it's surrounded by 30 million people within a 5 hours drive who are using petroleum products. And by being more than 1,000 miles inland, it is competitive with the mega refineries of the Middle East. And the other area is on power generation and transmission. You've heard about the wind energy in Kenya. Uganda has a lot of hydro potential. Solar, because we're on the equator. How do we bring the costs of these power generation modes down in order to become economic? There's a lot of money available under the climate change, various climate change financing arrangements. And what we're looking at in Uganda and East Africa, rather than saying mitigation, buying energy conservation, energy efficient, machines and so on, we want to look at adaptation to make the greening of our countries part of the mainstream, part of agriculture, part of transport. That's why we want to develop water transport, part of the energy generation, renewables. We've got a very favorable tariff for people who want to come in. And, oh yes, I forgot to say, we have a tariff structure in Uganda whereby an investor can have a look and say, the government commits to buy all my power and put it on the grid. And if I'm doing it from biomass, this is the tariff. If I'm doing it from hydro, this is the tariff. From diesel, from solar, from geothermal. In fact, we have an American investor who's putting up a geothermal power plant. And the available information shows there's enough reserves for a second geothermal power plant in that very same vicinity, even as we explore for more. The whole of Western Uganda is just one treasure trove of minerals, oil, and gas, since it's a volcanic, it's an extinct volcanic area.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Minister. I think I want to give the last word to Ambassador Mitifu on this before we perhaps open it up for another round of questions. And I want at this point in time, when we come back to the audience, to really sort of zero in on some other issues that we haven't touched upon that. I know that we're almost out of time, but Ambassador, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to add, I'm glad Madam Minister talked about the Western Uganda and all the wealth on Western Uganda, so that's Eastern DRC. And I think one thing that we didn't touch, but Ambassador Mulamula touched it, is the gas exploration. And when I talk about the Ruzizi project, which is a hydroelectric dam, and even when we talk about Inga 3 is a project that will last probably 8 years to build, 8 to 10 years to build, but which is a transformative project and also an integrating project. But we also have opportunities for small-scale energies. The minister named quite a few of them, and one of which actually is gas. Producing energy from gas. But I would like also to appeal to members of this audience, or maybe you can even pass on the words to other people. I want to emphasize the issue of women, African women, and I can speak for the DRC. They have been driving the economy, even at the informal level. And women work so hard. And because we're talking about the environment, about the climate, about the issue of deforestation, you know that the DRC has literally 47% of the Africa's rainforest. But at the same time, we're trying to protect this forest. We're trying to avoid deforestation. But the most majority of people, and particularly women, because they're the ones who cook, they're the ones who go out to try to make a living for their families, they still use wood to cook. And this can be simplified if there is a developer who can come in and develop small cooking stove by which these women can use gas instead of wood. That will protect forests, because there have been incidents in the forest areas where, you know, people have fought with not soldiers, but those with environmentalists, because they want to prevent people from using wood to cook. How are you going to eat if you cannot find wood? So developing a stove that can use gas for cooking will lift so much burden from these women, and they will have more time to be more productive economically.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. I see a couple of hands on this side. Yes, sir?
Thank you very much. Madam Ambassador's comment raises a very interesting question. First of all, I'm delighted to hear the talk of East African integration. I'm on the advisory panel of the East African Development Bank, and I'm also delighted, which is an instrument of your community, and I'm delighted that they have been rated highly, and that Tanzania hopefully will also go for a rating someday. The cook stoves, it raises the issue of technology, appropriate technology, you see. In the infrastructure investments that are being made, I think the community and the East African region, it seems to me, should consider a focus on a center of excellence in technology that can help adapt technologies that exist around the world, but adapt them for local use at local price points. Cook stoves exist in ethanol and gas-fired and so forth. But I think if you had a local institution that would partner with, I'm on the board of a college in the U.S., Harvey Mudd College. They would love to work on something of this sort. And you know, there are technologies that can be adapted that are powerful if you were to have, on the other side, partners. On the infrastructure, I would ask what is being done, because local financing is critical. If you bring in your own money and set up a fund, let's say, to say, I will match other investors coming from abroad, they will help mitigate the investor risk. So I would urge you to consider an East African, you know, or something like that, infrastructure fund that would be funding both local currency, which is always a risk in infrastructure, because the revenues, to the extent you get them, are local, and the currency financing that you get is overseas. So I would suggest that you think about these two ideas, and I'd like to know what's being done in those two. Institutional infrastructure for appropriate technologies, and financing where you can put your money where your mouth is, as well as the international investors.
Two concrete suggestions. Gentlemen, just table in the back there. Yeah. Sasha?
Great. Thank you so much, Sasha Lezhna from the Enough Project. Thank you so much to CCA for organizing this very important panel. We see this issue as so important to actually helping peace and stability in the Great Lakes. People often see it the other way around, that you have to have peace and stability first everywhere in order for investment to come, and we see it as the opposite. In fact, that responsible business practice can help enable and incentivize peace and stability. Thank you so much, ambassadors and ministers, for your comments. I have two questions. Number one, you talked about some of the railroad and road projects, and there was just one that was linking to Congo, this Kisangani-Gulu road, which is obviously very positive. Having spent a number of years in Gulu myself, I think that would be very, very great for the region. But what about the railroads? What about other roads? Is there more thought to linking those projects to Congo? Because, I mean, that's such a big country, such a big market, such a home to many natural resources. I think it's so important to add it to the formal economies of the region, and we were very encouraged by the this ribbon cutting ceremony for the railroad project earlier with the 3 presidents from Rwanda, South Sudan, and Uganda earlier, but we'd love to add Congo to that one. I think it can help enable peace and security. So just wondered if there's some thought about that, both on the northern and the central railroads. And secondly, Minister Kiwanuka, you mentioned the oil refinery. I think one very interesting part of this oil refinery is that the East African community, with a number of countries, is actually one of the investors in the project. And so I was wondering if there's some thought to the construction of another value-adding factory or mechanism, like a minerals smelter, for example, that would have such a regional buy-in to it, so that the different countries could kind of contribute, rather than Congo building a smelter, Rwanda building a smelter, Uganda building a smelter. Sorry. So if there would be some possibility to do that also for minerals. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So why don't we start with the first 2 questions, suggestions about the infrastructure fund as well as the institutional setup for a technology center. Anybody wants to take this up? Is there anything being done about it or planned?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Ambassador Mitifu.
Thank you. I think I just wanted to approve. I think it was those 3 ideas are just wonderful ideas. But there are talks, at least in the case of the DRC, there are talks with other countries, especially Southern African development. I'm sorry. Maybe I need a glass of water.
Some water just next to you.
Okay. Thank you. The minister, can you go ahead?
Okay, I'll go ahead. As far as an infrastructure fund is concerned, what we're doing in Uganda is that the government has made it very clear, and it's part of our policy, that the revenues, the government share of the revenues from the petroleum exploitation will go into infrastructure. And that every year the revenues will be collected by the tax authority, our equivalent of the IRS, will be collected by the tax authority and put into the government single account in the Central Bank of Uganda. And every year those monies will be appropriated by Parliament to fund that year's share of our overall infrastructure development program. And whatever is left over will go into a sovereign fund to be invested offshore, not because we don't have trust in our country, but because we want to avoid what you call the Dutch disease, by releasing too much money into an economy that's not yet able to absorb it. So that is the way, that is our take on the infrastructure funding. When it comes to counterpart financing for various projects, we're in discussions with some of our multilateral lenders, particularly the EU, to see whereby instead of borrowing money to build a road, for instance, we borrow money to pay our share of a contract, let's say with a semi-private financing house, and that way buy down the interest rate of the borrowed money, and make them, and that way make sure we get more financing for more projects, but at a more affordable rate. As to the appropriate technologies, what are we doing to encourage local technologies? In Uganda, we have a lot of mainly young innovators. I know you've all heard about Kenya's Savannah Valley, but quite a lot of those people are Ugandans. And what we're doing in Uganda is later on this year, and I think around the time of the mission that's going to come out to Uganda, we're going to hold a venture capital forum to bring together the venture capitalists based in Nairobi, based in Uganda, based in as far away as South Africa, and hopefully the members of the mission that will come out to Uganda, to bring them face to face with the innovations that have been developed in Uganda. For instance, I don't know whether you're aware that a Ugandan university student and his roommate have invented a malaria detection mechanism that can test for malaria without invading your skin. And in these days of highly communicable diseases, anything that avoids invasion of the skin is a sure deal. So that project has now been taken up for financing by a venture capitalist. But we want to bring more of these innovations to the attention of venture capitalists, and we're going to call it the angels come to town. So we'll keep you informed about that one. On the railway, yes, it's very important to have a railway. We do have an existing railway. It's a narrow gauge railway and has suffered from lack of maintenance. But we're going to, again, we're going to quickly repair it and support it so we can import the oil drilling equipment, which has to come in by rail and not by road because it's so heavy as to kill the roads. And we're also developing an airstrip in the oil area where the oil companies can import their delicately calibrated instrumentation by air, which will become our second international airport, but we'll start off in a phased manner with the airstrip and the navigation aids. For the refinery, you read my mind. We have made clear that the refinery design will incorporate a link to a fertilizer plant right next door to it, which will produce ammonia fertilizer for the Ugandan agricultural industry and for those of the surrounding countries, DRC, Tanzania, Kenya, Rwanda, and Burundi. This will be the first ammonia fertilizer plant in Eastern or Southern Africa. So that's how we're going to value add there. Okay. The iron ore smelter, yes, this is something we are determined to where the government is going to come in and hurry it up if the private sector doesn't take it up quickly. And it's an area for it's a good area for a public-private partnership.
And it could be modeled, sort of after the refinery sort of sharing.
And it's just down the biggest iron ore deposit, just down the road from the refinery.
There is so much to say, and I know that unfortunately we need to stop at this point. I'm sorry that I will not be able to open up another round of questions or comment, and more importantly, I regret that the panelists, because of the lack of time, are not able to come back and summarize some of the key points that they say. But there is a lot that some of them have a written presentation. The good news is that, frankly, we are trying at the regional level. To bring not only the 3 countries that are represented here, but the 13 countries, 10 others that are not here. As I told you before, we have a process that is ongoing whereby we have developed an investment opportunity brief to cover the entire Great Lakes region. It's not going to be exhaustive, but some of the key projects like in the Northern Corridor, Central Corridor are featured in there and it's well developed. We will come back to you for the CCA. That has been a fantastic partner. I remember some of the guidance, very useful guidance that I got from CCA on this. We'll come back to you, and we are looking toward the month of December to do the first regional consultation if ministers have time to actually sit down and look at the brief. I want to thank you very much. You have been a very nice crowd and fantastic audience. Looking forward to engaging you again. And again, reiterating our gratitude to CCA for this fantastic opportunity. Please.
Mr. Assistant Secretary General, it's good to see you again. You certainly, we are looking forward to having further discussions on how we can work with you. Madam Minister, thank you very much for taking the time. I know your schedule was very jammed. It was relatively short notice, and appreciate it very much. And of course, my friends, and we're very grateful to both ambassadors. The fact is, though, you do need more stability in the region if you expect businesses, and how we have that. It's not going to be one before the other, but there does have to be far more planning, as the Assistant Secretary General knows and has said. So we're looking forward to working with you. The reception is outside and networking. Thank all of you. Thank you. Thank you very much.